Well, it's 8 o'clock. So, Om Amen, Om Amen, Om Amen. May the whole universe be pervaded by peace. Let that infinite universal peace prevail throughout my being. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beings everywhere. I don't know where everybody is.
Uh, some people don't have electricity.
I know, but most of the people, the power was out for us for a while too.
Oh, okay.
Maybe that's true for Heidi at this point.
I think she got power.
Cindy, I know has power, or at least had power.
Okay.
So I don't know where she is because she was supposed to join us. That's what she said. Aha, there's Bart.
Ah,
Bart, good to see you.
Hello, good to see you, brother.
Glad you have power.
hello, Bart.
Hi there, June. How are you?
I'm just fine. Just
Wonderful. Bless you. Are people having power outages?
We did, and it
Is
came
that
back on sometime. We weren't able to Zoom Arati this evening, but sometime long about 07:20, 7:30, it came back on.
okay? That was why I tried to join you about 7:10, and so now I know that at least the link works. It was the Wi-Fi was down.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
And there's Aaron. Hello, Aaron.
Hello, namaste, everyone.
Namaste. Bart, do you have the book open there?
Yes, I do. Brother.
Okay. Well, we might as well start. We'll see who else joins us, if anyone.
Okay.
But this is Catherine of Siena's long meditation on suffering. So please read it for us, and if you would be so kind as to read it slowly.
Okay.
And,
are you are you able to hear me without any feedback?
yes,
You can hear me well. Okay. I want to make
Yes.
sure.
hear you very well, and it very much sounds like you as well.
Good. Okay.
Hello, Swayam.
That's why okay.
And there's Amy. Good. So people are joining.
Namaste.
Namaste. So no one will begrudge me.
Okay. No one will begrudge me. I talk about it sometimes with him, all the suffering in the world. Dear God, I have prayed, how is it possible all the horrors I have seen, all the atrocities you allow man to commit when you, God, are ever standing so near and could help us? Could we not hear your voice say no? With such love and power, never again would we harm. And my Lord replied, who would understand if I said that I cannot bear to confine a wing and not let it learn from the course it chooses? But what of a man walking lost in a forest, weeping and calling your name for help, and unknown to him, he is heading for a covered pit with sharp spears in it that will maim his flesh when he crashes through the trap? And God says, yes, why don't I remove every object from this world that could cause someone to weep? Yes, why don't I speak in a way that could save a life? I opened my hand, and the infinite ran to the edges of space, and all possibilities are contained therein. All possibilities, even sorrow. In the end, Nothing that ever caused one pain will exist. No one will begrudge me. The absolute innocence of all within my creation takes a while to understand. And I'll read it again.
But I just want to make this one comment.
Okay.
When we hear St. Catherine speaking to God here, please let us at least provisionally have the understanding that this is her actual conversation with God.
Mm-hmm.
This is the way the saints, and this was a girl who began her relationship with the Lord when she was 6 years old. And so thank you, Bart, for being patient.
Uh-huh.
I just want us to at least provisionally take the attitude that what she's saying is the absolute truth about her conversation with God.
Yes. She left home at 6 for her wedding with God.
7. So she
Or
was
7. Yeah. Yeah. No one will begrudge me. I talk about it sometimes with him, all the suffering in the world. Dear God, I have prayed, how is it possible all the horrors I have seen, all the atrocities you allow man to commit, when you, God, are ever standing so near and could help us? Could we not hear your voice say, no, with such love and power, never again would we harm? And my Lord replied, who would understand if I said that I cannot bear to confine a wing and not let it learn from the course it chooses? But what of a man walking lost in a forest, weeping and calling your name for help, and unknown to him, he is heading for a covered pit with sharp spears in it that will maim his flesh when he crashes through the trap? Yes, this is God speaking. Yes, why don't I remove every object from this world that could cause someone to weep? Yes, why don't I speak in a way that could save a life? I opened my hand, and the infinite ran to the edges of space, and all possibilities are contained therein. All possibilities, even sorrow. In the end, nothing that ever caused one pain will exist. No one will begrudge me. The absolute innocence of all within my creation takes a while to understand. And with that, I think this is just a really intimate conversation that you would hear two lovers or soulmates having. And I can't make any quotes, but I can just say, think of the end of the book of Job around the last chapters um, as a comparison. So anyway,
beautiful.
I'll mute myself.
No, anything you have to say, we want to hear, dear.
Just I'm just thinking right now we're on a spiritual path. Hopefully, all of us, whether we recognize it or not, all 8 billion people on Earth. And a lot of people begrudge God. A lot of people become atheist. A lot of people become fanatical in different ways. In the end, no one, in the end, nothing that ever caused one pain will exist. And I can accept that and have faith in it right now. The absolute innocence, and that's capitalized in the poem, the absolute innocence of all within my creation takes a while to understand. And so it's just, I guess, going through the levels of less knowledge to more knowledge, or the levels of Maya and ignorance that's so painful right now to bear. I have a faith that one day I will know, and we will know once we, I don't know, once we polish that mirror, but gently. We can't begrudge God and take a scouring pad to that mirror and say, I want it over now. I want the answers now. So the impatience is something that spiritual impatience is something I've been struggling with a lot lately. I love you all. Bless you.
Thank you, Bart. Anyone else have anything to say about this truly remarkable conversation that St. Catherine of Siena had with God?
Brother Shankara?
Yes, Swayam.
Yeah, I think this is one of those poems that's in one way. I mean, it's a conversation we have with God, or I have with God all the time, and kind of, or what I think of as God. It's so difficult. I mean, I'm sure everybody's hearing in the news how bad the COVID situation is in India.
Yes.
Almost every friend and we know here have had members affected, and it's a terrible situation. And it's hard to put it all together. At the same time, towards the end, it's very encouraging that there's nothing which causes pain will ever exist. So it's one of those that you have to like read the poem and kind of let it sink in to get the magic, or I don't know what to say.
Well, you're certainly right about the chaotic and terrible situation in India and elsewhere in the world because of the virus. The God's words to us at the end, the absolute innocence, takes a while to understand. And as Bart pointed out, those words are capitalized, meaning they have extraordinary significance. So, because Catherine herself is still questioning and still asking God about this, the heart has this response. And God says, he tries to explain. I can't bear to confine anything. It has to find its own way. And so this takes a while to understand. And I'm not even sure that the word understand is what actually happens. But anyone else have anything to say about this?
I've kind of had the point of view lately to give up on trying to understand things that I don't understand, and just have faith in the divine and practice my devotion. And I think these things become more clearly and clearly. I find in my own spiritual practice, trying to understand something sometimes has just held me back and from my spiritual practice.
Very good.
I'm going to unmute and probably ramble a little bit. I'm sorry I missed the reading and the beginning of the conversation, but I do know this poem, and really, this is a really powerful one. And spending time with it can be very helpful in answering some of the questions that don't usually get answered. This, the thing about all the pain, what we see, what we witness is all the pain and suffering in the world. Why doesn't God fix it? One of the things that question makes me think about is, what is prayer then? What does prayer do, when the kind of prayer where you pray for another person that has scientifically demonstrated power in it, whether you believe it has anything to do with God or not, is praying getting God's attention so that God steps in and intervenes? I don't think so.
No, I agree.
Because if God were going to, if that was the way God was, then God would be a God that was like, oh, if you give me enough attention, I'll do stuff for you. And that's not God. It's like, my mind's getting kind of foggy right now because this weather is so strange and the sky is such a weird color right now. I'm looking at all of a sudden everything went out of my head. I'm sorry. I'm just
Well, what you were leading to is this: all possibilities are contained therein, all possibilities. And what precedes that? I opened up my hand, and the infinite, again, a capitalized word, the infinite ran to the edges of space, and all possibilities are contained therein, all possibilities, even sorrow.
Yeah.
And so God is, first of all, Catherine calls on his omnipotence. And he says, yes, I could do that. And then he speaks of his omnipresence. I opened up my hand, and the infinite, the omnipresent, ran to the edges of space. And all possibilities are contained therein, all possibilities, even sorrow. And so it's so hard for us. And this is why I said it's understand is one word for it. But it seems to me that what he really means is the absolute innocence of all within my creation takes a while to surrender to. We have to surrender this idea that we know what the hell is going on. There's no question that what Swayam said isn't true. Everything is just chaotic and horrible in India. And as she pointed out, everyone here, all of the people who are from India and have loved ones in India are feeling very stressed and upset because they know people who are either dying or in the hospital and suffering greatly. Over and over, one way or another, we get these lessons and from these saints that God alone is the doer. Who would understand if I said I cannot bear to confine a wing and not let it learn from the course it chooses? But the wing isn't independent. And this is that mystery that's hard to understand or surrender to, it seems. This is the mystery at the heart of all of these saints speaking to us, is that in fact God is beyond our understanding. So that's my little sermonette. Anybody else have anything to say?
Brother Shankara, I think again, sometimes this is where constantly trying to be in the witness state um, brings some degree of distance, separating thoughts from emotions and trying to be more of witness than getting entangled. Um, it's difficult, but just the repeated attempts does kind of help.
Yes. And in that witness state, when we're seeing what's going on as something that is happening in the divine presence, which is our presence, then there's less of a tendency to judge and impose. And this, the example that Catherine brings up, well, what about this person walking in the forest, weeping and calling on your name? And his steps are taking him toward a trap that he's going to fall into and hurt himself grievously, maybe kill him. So what is for us to understand about the words absolute innocence? June, do you have anything to add?
I think a large part of our human experience is trying to answer these questions.
Ah, yes, dear. Yes.
Some start very young, some people don't realize it until they're older. We all seem to be in a different stage or different exposure.
I like that word.
And we're searching. It is, as Cindy said, I think, a very powerful poem.
Yes.
And it makes my heart sing.
Ah, how beautifully said. And what does it sing of, June? As it sings, what is it singing of?
Well, I think it's a glimpse of what heaven is.
Mm. How lovely. Yes, where we will understand it all in the great by and by. Yes. The path of the saints takes us to a kind of heaven where we come to full understanding of the absolute innocence, we're told. Anything else before we move on from anyone? This is lovely.
Yeah. This, it's kind of hard to reconcile the parts about the man calling for God, calling your name for help, and he's fixing to get into some real bad trouble here, and reconcile that with the promises made by the avatars and incarnations. But in thinking about that, it's kind of like, calling the name of the divine is like someone who is more in tune with the divine on a regular basis wouldn't actually even probably have to call the name. They would just be in the presence of, and probably would walk around that pit. This is what I was trying to get out earlier, and then my brain went mushy about prayer. And it's not that God decides the person or people have prayed enough or with enough sincerity that God's going to do something and fix it. God's going to make this guy go around. It's like the prayer brings you in touch with, it's like Ramakrishna who said, an expert dancer cannot put a foot wrong. And it's not that a very devoted, a person devoted to God isn't ever going to have troubles or make mistakes. But I think the more time you spend with God, the less of those pits with sharp spears you're going to fall into. And I could be wrong, but I think
I think you're right, dear.
And I think that's what prayer, like mass prayer is, or bunch of people praying for a person. And when that seems to have an effect, I think it's all those people and the person receiving it. The person has to receive it too.
Oh, yes.
And they're receiving pure love, which is God, from those people praying.
Yes. Yes, it isn't that God changes. It's as it changes things. It's as you pointed out, the person changes and will walk around the pit and not fall into it. Or, as you said, certainly will not be blinding themselves with tears and calling for help. Because there's a different relationship. And it isn't that one is right and the other is wrong. It's just as it says at the end of the poem. All of it is absolutely innocent. And we don't really know what that means.
I'm reminded of some of Rabia's poems. I don't remember the details, but she never saw anything as suffering at all.
Well, she said that her teacher told her that every scar that she bore was what brought her to where she is. So be grateful for each of them. That's what she says in one of her poems. And all of the saints in one way or another make this point. And by the way, Swayam, I want you to know that at least from here, there's great prayerful energy going toward this situation in India.
Thank you, Brother Shankara.
And most particularly to those two people from India with whom I live. They're suffering, both of them. They're both kind of frantic. Sharda, would you like to read the next poem, Cindy?
Sure. Let's see. Is it that skill? Is that that skill? A thorn has entered your foot. That is why you weep at times at night. There are some in this world who can pull it out. The skill that takes, they have learned from him. That skill. A thorn has entered your foot. That is why you weep at times at night. There are some in this world who can pull it out. The skill that takes, they have learned from him. That just, of course, makes me think of the little story about the lion with the thorn in his paw. And is it a mouse?
Mm-hmm.
Little mouse. I don't even remember the story. I just remember the mouse takes it out, and instead of running away and saying, "Oh, that big mean lion will eat me," I'm not going to help that big mean lion. Goes and pulls the thorn out, and they live happily ever after, or something. But but it's about that sort of fearless compassion.
Yes.
Fearless
wonderful, wonderfully said. Does anyone else know that lion with the thorn in its paw story?
compassion.
I mean, I remember it hazily from my youth. I can't remember whether it was an Aesop's fable or what. Now, this metaphor of a thorn has entered your foot. What does that do? That keeps you from walking properly. It hurts constantly. That is why you weep sometimes at night. And then there are some in the world who can pull it out. They learned that skill from him. What is it that they learned? Anyone else have anything to say about this remarkable little poem? Again, there's a through line, I think, from the last one. The person who can relieve you of suffering has understood what there is to understand about the absolute innocence. And there's no judgment or begrudging.
It's interesting. We move from a covered pit with sharp spears to just a little thorn from one poem to the next.
Yes, and yet both are bringing tears. Liam, do you have the book open? Would you like to read the next poem?
Yes.
Thank you.
And just to confirm, it's wherever you may look.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Wherever you may look, wisdom is so kind and wise that wherever you may look, you can learn something about God. Why would not the omnipresent teach that way? Wherever you may look, wisdom is so kind and wise that wherever you may look, you can learn something about God. Why would not the omnipresent teach that way?
It's a remarkable statement that she makes. Wherever you may look, you can learn something about God. Just as an aside, among many of the Native American peoples, this is one of the articles of their faith, that wherever your eye falls, there's something to learn, to know about the Great Spirit. And those who practice the way take that attitude. Wisdom is so kind and wise. Yes, someone else?
Yes. So by what you're saying, like, there aren't really any coincidences in life. It's
This is, if we accept what's said in the Gospels, whether it be the Christian Gospels, as ye sow, so shall ye reap, or whether we put it in the terms of karma. Yes, you're absolutely right, Aaron. There are no coincidences. Any follow-up thought to that, Aaron? What is it that makes you think about coincidences?
I guess I just think of it like astounding, like that I have been afforded the opportunity to like study Vedanta and learn directly from people who learned directly from Sri Ramakrishna and his disciples. And it's just kind of, I don't know, it's kind of crazy to wrap my head around.
Yes, isn't it amazing how fortunate we are when we run across a teacher that is that speaks not as the scribes and the Pharisees, but as one having authority. There are some great teachers in the Christian tradition these days that are of that stripe. And they would, I can imagine that they would just clap their hands at this poem. I mean, the question at the end, why would not the omnipresent teach that way? The omnipresent is going to teach us by showing us something about itself wherever we may look. Anything else from anyone?
Yes, what really stood out to me about this poem is the first line, just, wisdom is. And what came to mind was what I believe Aaron shared before about, sometimes the tendency to try to understand prevents the knowing, kind of paraphrase what he was saying. And, just this idea of, let's just say, wisdom is, like it just is. There's no need to break it down or try to figure it out. It just kind of is.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is, because it's omnipresent.
Yes, we also have to sharpen or develop that perception so that we can learn something about God.
Yes, and that means
Amen.
not allowing ourselves to be distracted by our habitual ways of thinking and being about the world. And you're right, we sharpen our perception by observing the way we just do as knee-jerk responses. This happens, we react. This happens, we react. This instead, no. As you said, we sharpen our perceptions, and instead of reacting, we say, what's really here? How shall I act? Or is there any action at all necessary? Swayam, would you like to read the next poem? Nothing makes more sense.
Sure, Brother Shankara. Nothing makes more sense. The force that created the unimaginable splendors and the unimaginable horrors has taken refuge in us, and it will follow our commands. Power in the hands of the weak creates suffering and divides men. Those who have held beauty work to overcome their prejudice and seek to bring all into her arms. For nothing makes more sense than being there with him. Nothing makes more sense. The force that created the unimaginable splendors and the unimaginable horrors has taken refuge in us, and it will follow our commands. Power in the hands of the weak creates suffering and divides men. Those who have held beauty work to overcome their prejudice and seek to bring all into her arms. For nothing makes more sense than being there with him. So again, I guess it's pointing to the divinity within us and who manifests what makes the difference.
Yes, indeed, Swam. Go on. Follow that thought.
It's again, I guess moving from the lesser truth to the higher truth, overcoming our weakness, seeing the beauty. One thing I'm sort of trying to get it wrapped around is she changes from her arms and then with him. So I couldn't quite understand the significance of
Those
this.
who have held beauty, beauty is the her.
Oh, okay.
So that's the referent. Those who have held beauty work to overcome their prejudice and seek to bring all into her arms. For nothing makes more sense than being there with him, the him who has taken refuge in us. I mean, that's how I read it. Over and over, it's been said that there's no right reading of these poems. It's how each of us hears it in our uniqueness. But the first stanza sets it up. The force, and then it defines what the force has done. But if we just cut to the chase, the force has taken refuge in us and will follow our commands. That is an astounding follow to that poem about no one will begrudge me. Will follow our commands. And then she makes the inevitable correlation, power in the hands of the weak. So the force has taken refuge in the weak as well as the strong. Power in the hands of the weak creates suffering and divides men. Contrast. Those who have held beauty, work to overcome their prejudice and seek to bring all into beauty's arms. For nothing makes more sense than being there with him. Being in beauty's arms with that which has taken refuge there. So that's my story about this poem. Anyone else? I liked the way you developed that thought. So it was good.
Thank you, Brother Shankar.
So there's the unimaginable splendors, which lead to the thought of the beauty, and the unimaginable horrors, both stemming from the fact that the force has taken refuge in us. We are the we are that in which the king resides. The kingdom of heaven is within, the king resides in us. And remarkably, she says, will follow our commands. Anything else from anyone? I get tired of hearing myself talk.
I think this is kind of what I was thinking about with the earlier poem about prayer and God not intervening. I mean, it's us.
Mhm.
Because that force who creates everything is in us.
Mhm.
And depending on whether we want to share the beauty and the best stuff, I mean, that is a way to show gratitude
Mhm.
to the divine, is to seek to bring all into her arms,
Mm.
rather than just saying, oh, thank you for this lovely day. You know, just for me, thank you for making the day good for me, which, you know, I'm not saying that's wrong or bad, but I'm saying I feel like God would rather us share that
Yes.
than,
That's why we are many. So we
yeah,
can share this.
yeah.
The manyness is a way of allowing us to share this.
Mhm. Yeah.
And as you said about prayer, you know, Swami Prabhavananda was asked about prayer. Does it do any good? He says, what, do you think you're separate? You're not separate. So when you direct some energy, some of that force that's within us, that's taken refuge here, when you direct some of that energy, it has an effect. It isn't God sitting on a throne and throwing thunderbolts or dirt bags. It's us. And the Swami also remarked, we must remember that every thought is a prayer.
Brother Shankara,
Yes.
I was also thinking, although it says it will follow our commands, but in a different way, if we take the servant attitude of the bhakta
Mm-hmm.
and spend effort in manifesting the splendors and spreading the beauty, then we are serving that aspect of the divine in us as a servant.
Absolutely, dear. June, you've been quiet for a long time, and yet I cannot imagine that there aren't some really rich and wonderful thoughts coming up in within you. If you choose to share them, we'd love to hear them.
Well, I was just in a prayer of gratitude for this hour each week with other people that are searching and opening up to each other. I just think it's a wonderful opportunity for us all.
Thank you, June. And I think we all, each in our own way, share your feeling. Otherwise, why would we come back?
Right.
It is a joy to be with people this way.
And I just thank the Lord for this book.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
just so amazing to me
Yes.
that he had the vision that it would affect so many lives. He must have had a vision.
Well, it's intimated in the beginning of the book where it's said about how it came to be, that he was guided by the Spirit of Christ.
Absolutely.
And that wonderful, wonderful opening poem of Hafiz's, I am a hole in the flute that the breath of Christ blows through. Listen to this music. Sweet.
Could I share something
Please, dear.
that this poem brings to mind for me? This is I don't know if you can see this, but this is a bookmark that my grandfather had. He died at age 94 in 1994. He was born at the turn of the last century, but he kept this in his Bible, which he kept by his bed and he read every day. And he cut this from his church bulletin. And it's got this quote. And my grandfather, by the way, was a gardener, loved flowers, roses, all kinds of things. And he was also a painter. He painted. So I found this after he passed away when we had gone to North Carolina for his funeral. And I was just sitting in his room in his rocking chair, looking at his Bible and found his, it's from something called Beauty and the Oppressed. It says, so I conclude that concern for beauty is not a moral cop-out. It leads us firmly into the midst of all that is going on in our world. Where there is beauty apparent, we are to enjoy it. Where there is beauty hidden, we are to unveil it. Where there is beauty defaced, we are to restore it. Where there is no beauty at all, we are to create it. All of which places us too in the arena where oppression occurs, where the oppressed congregate, and where we too are called to be. I was pretty knocked out that was that important to my grandfather.
It's a beautiful, beautiful statement.
Yeah, it is. So I use this as a bookmark for this. Just sort of my Bible. One of them anyway.
Beautiful. So that beauty resides in us. And we are to do whatever we can with it. Share it, create it, restore it. Beautiful. What a beautiful statement. And it starts with that remarkable statement, concern for beauty is not a moral cop-out. So that's our left brain dominant world will tell you that. Oh, don't be sappy. Be practical. I love your grandfather at a distance.
Oh, yeah. I love him still from a distance. Yeah. He was a cool guy.
Any last thoughts from anyone?
Yes, Brother Shankar, I wanted to, since we were talking about prayer, I had a pretty powerful meditation experience last night. And I almost always like do my meditation in front of an image of Ramakrishna. And in this particular instance, I could like very much feel his presence, and it was really astounding. And I came to the realization of like omnipresence and how like Ramakrishna is always present, and that he's heard every prayer that I've ever made. And it was just like no words for it. I don't know.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Aaron. May that feeling completely overtake every aspect of you and result in the most beautiful things you are capable of. You're capable of those very, very beautiful things. Now just imagine where we're going to start next week. This place of abundance. We know nothing until we know everything. I mean, really, what a statement. And that's just what Aaron was gesturing to. The fact that he had this feeling of omnipresence, the omnipresence of the divine. Everything, everywhere, every bit of knowledge. So any final thought from anyone else? And June, thank you so very much for sharing this evening. Thank you for being forthcoming.
Last week, my OCR went out, and that is my link to independence. And my daughter was in here trying to get it going. So that's where I was last week.
Well, I'm sorry that we missed you last week, and we did miss you last week.
Well, I certainly miss it.
Yeah,
I'm not there too.
and we miss Heidi this evening. I hope she's okay. Maybe she's just in a power outage. In any event, dears,
I'm sorry. Did you ask me a question?
no, dear. I was just commenting on the beauty of what you said. The fact that you missed this and that we missed you. And does anyone have a final prayer that they'd like to offer?
I don't know if this is a prayer, but I wish I would be as graceful as June when I'm her age.
That is definitely a prayer. Yes, we can all devoutly wish that. So, may the whole universe be pervaded by peace. Let that infinite universal peace prevail throughout my being. Om Amen, peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be cheerful. May you have peace of mind. Go forward in the loving and protective embrace of the Lord. Until next time, lovely people. See you then.
Thank you. Good night. Good night, everybody.
Good night, good night, good night.
Good night,
Good
Shankar.
night.
That's blessing on you.
Thank you, dear. I accept it with great alacrity and gratitude.